Okay, so let's see the practical application we are going to develop now.
So if I run this now, if I put admin, I know admin, I have programmed it now. So if I put admin, right? Awesome guys, awesome. So it's going to the admin page, so close. If I put a normal user, say ABC, right? And if I say the normal user, if I give a wrong password, wonderful, invalid username password. If I put the right password for a normal user, awesome guys, normal user.
Okay, so let's continue to develop this application now.
Excited to take you through this video lecture, and let's do it now. So the lesson name today is it's under C# database programming. It's lesson 5B, ADO.NET, MVC, datasets, Visual Designer example. We will be using Visual Studio 2019 for the practicals and Microsoft Docs referencing. So it's a very interesting lesson, and let's see what's inside this. So it's database programming, and it's about ADO.NET, MVC. So the areas we are going to cover is ADO.NET, MVC, and then datasets and Visual Designer exam, the that area. So the focus is more on MVC development, right? So let's look at the slides. But very important guys, there's a prerequisite for this. You should not start this lesson, you should not look at this until you, because this is lesson 5B. So until you are very clear about the previous lessons about database programming in this channel, which is lesson 1, lesson 2, lesson 3, and lesson 4, you better not look at this, because in this lesson 5B, what we are doing is we are summarizing all the knowledge you have gained up to now in lesson 1, 2, 3, 4 in database programming. I'm talking about database programming guys, because we have other lessons as well and in this channel for C#, but I'm telling about the database programming lesson 1, 2, 3, 4, right? You better read it and get a good idea before you do this, and especially the lesson 5A as well, right? So prerequisite is you need to know the following before you look at this video. One thing for sure, you need to know about installing and using MS SQL Server database. You need to know about creating the database and the tables and inserting data into the database using anything like MS SQL Management Studio or some web-based interface, right? And then you need to know about the basics of ADO.NET programming. You need to know about data providers, data sets, and data sets using Visual Designer, right? Also, you need to have a clear understanding before you start this video about MVC, right, and the role of each of this, and especially multi-threaded architecture, DAOs, entity classes, data transfer objects. And look at this last bullet point, right? If you are not familiar about any of the above, have a look at the previous lessons of C# database programming in this channel, right? So don't touch this until that. And this is an exciting lecture about summarizing everything in a practical manner. So in this lesson, you will be learning why and how and what about MVC and ADO.NET MVC, practical implementation of MVC, right, especially using Visual Designer and practical code examples. Lesson plan is the same, we will be going through the MVC and ADO.NET development. Now, so what we are going to do in this lesson is we are going to do a simple login form and its logic. And then we are from the login page, we are going to go for a main page, landing page, right? But the interesting thing is we are going to do this using MVC, right? So the view will be the front end. The controller, for example, now when I'm logging, I got a table called user table. So I need to have a controller. So I will, for example, I will have a controller called user controller, and then the interface for the user controller, user controller and user controller implementation, right? And then the model. In the model, basically I will be having 3 projects: the view project, the controller project, and the model project. The view project will be a Windows Forms, the controller and the model will be class libraries, and in the model I will be having my entity classes, especially like entity relationship mapping classes like user. For example, for the user table I will be a user class. Then the logic to manipulate with the data. So for example, it's a user data I'm going to validate and do stuff, so I will be having a service class, a logic class called user logic, meaning the interface will be user logic and user logic IMPL. And the DAO class, For example, for the accessing the user data, I will have a user DAO and the classes. So if you are not familiar about the DAO and any of these logic, and why the logic classes are inside the model, why the DAO classes are inside the model, why they are not inside the controller, if you are confused with that, look at our previous lesson, especially lesson 5a, which explains all those, right? And if you look at each of the class I have mentioned, I have a interface and a implementation. So for example, the controller class, I user control and user control IMPL. So if you are not sure why I'm using an interface, same. If you look at the logic classes, I have I user logic, which is the interface, and the user logic implementation, user logic implementation as the class. So if you are not familiar why I'm having that, have a look at our previous video about interfaces, right? Then you will realize why I have that. So before that, right, all good. So I'm going to start with the practical demonstration for this, right? So I'm going to make a new Visual Studio project, right? So let's make it fast, right? So I'm going to create a new project. The view will be a WinForms. So, and also this will be overall WinForms project. So I'm going to make it as a WinForms project, right? Cool. Click next, right? And let me give a location. Let's be fast. Let's be fast. Okay, right? Okay, guys. So inside this, what will be my project name? So it's, let's make it look meaningful, right? So this is lesson 5b ADO.NET MVC, right? Let's keep it that, right? Lesson 5b ADO.MVC, simple name, right? Looks good, guys, looks good. Okay, click create. Okay, so I'm getting my project, right? So the first thing is, in my project, what I'm going to do, guys, is have a look at this, right? Have a look at this. Okay, so I'm going to make a few things here. So this is my WinForms project, so I'm going to rename it as my view project, and then immediately I'm going to create the model and the controller, right? So add new project, so a class library, right? Class library, and let's say C# framework next, right? So I'm going to call this as my model, or the controller, let us say controller project, and then I'm going to create my class library framework. So model, right? So I got the three projects, model and the view and the control. I got the form, right? And I'm going to do as I said, the login validation. So I'm going to go to the toolbox and get few things like a couple of labels and the buttons, sorry, the text boxes and the buttons, right? So I'm going to quickly design this interface, right? Okay, guys, I did some decorations. uh, it looks nice, so you could do the same the way you like. So now before I log in, I need to as a developer, I need to access my database and see what data it is, right? So I will click on Server Explorer, and I can see my data connections. If you don't know how to do this, look at the previous videos in this series of how to do this. So first you have to get this. So I will click on my data set, the data connection, and then I will log into it, right? I'm going to log into the data connection, so it will load me the data and show what data is available. So I got connected, so I can just expand my tables, right? And then to see, okay, I got a user table. So if you are not sure how to create tables and this, look at the previous videos on this database programming series, C#. So I got my user table, and I will expand it to see what the columns are, and then I can see I got a user ID, username, password, and user level, right? User level means whether it's admin node. Then I want to see what data is available. So what I'm going to do is right click and say show table data, right? So it will take a little bit of time because I'm connecting to a remote database. Okay guys, I got my data loaded. So this is sample data. So I got a username called ABC and a password called 123. I'm going to try with that, right? So going back to the form. So now I know I got my database, right? And so what's the next step? So I need, if I'm to connect to the database, I need to have my data set, right? Because I'm using the data set approach. So where will I create my data set? So in the MVC architecture, the data set belongs to the model. So I'm going to go to the model and create the data set now. Right click, add, new item, data set. So look at our previous lesson on data sets if you can't understand what I'm doing now. And then one more important thing. So data set, right? DS, data set. So I need to make sure that so this is dealing with users. So I will create a user data set. So in this project, if you are dealing with say employee table, for example, after this, then I will have an employee data set as well. If I'm dealing with department, I have a department. So its idea is you will have multiple data sets, and logically you will modularize them and add tables, related tables into the datasets. For example, user dataset, I will add the user tables. Employee dataset, I will have. So that's how you program. And look at our previous videos if you can't understand why we do like that. So I got a user dataset, right? So I'm user dataset. Click add. It will take a little. Okay, it created the dataset. So then, as usual, the next thing you do is you will go to the Server Explorer and you will drag the user table into your dataset. So it's taking a little bit of time for few reasons. One thing, it's connecting to my remote database and getting. The other thing, it will generate some code as well, right? So it's asking, are you sure you want to add the selected objects dataset? So I'll select yes. Once again, look at our previous video if you want to understand what this is, right? Just say yes. Now, immediately what happens is when I load this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to build my project. So because it's generating a lot of code, so I need to make sure that I build my project, right, to see whether everything is fine. Okay, good. And also as you see, I got the, if I click on this, I can see it's a data table, and then I got my adapters, right? So so this is the user data set which got created, and if you expand this, you will see you have the user data set, and you can see the table tab user table adapter. I got my table user table adapter, and inside my data set, if I expand, I got my user tab user data table and the user row tab user row. So look at the previous videos if you can't understand what this is, right? So now I got everything ready. Then the next important thing is, okay, I need two important things. So so this, now I need a query, right? I need a query for me to connect to this, but let's do it this way. Now just keep it aside. Now I know I have got connected to the database. Let's look at the form and come into this, right? So in the form, now when I click login, now I somehow need to connect to this where is it? I need to connect to this data set, because now this data set is connected to the table. So how do you do it in MVC, right? First thing is, the model will have, you can't connect directly to the data set, so you have to go through the controller. So when I click login, I need to connect to the controller. So which means in the controller project, I need to have a class to control the user actions, right? So I'm going to create a class to control the user actions. So on the controller, it has a class already created. Delete it, just I don't need it. So on the controller project, I'm going to create a new class called user controller, but the class will be wrapped with the interface as well. So first of all, the interface, right? Look at the previous videos if you can't understand why I create interface. So I will create interface called iUser. So because I'm dealing with the user table, I will say user controller, right? So interface user controller, add it, and then also I will create add okay, a new, this is the class. So this will be the implementation for that interface, right? So I will say user controller implementation, right? IMPL, implementation class, and then immediately I will make them public. If not, I will not be able to use them, right? So very important, don't forget this step, right? Otherwise you will not be able to use them from the other projects. Because and once again, if you don't know what this is, look at our previous videos in this series, right, about classes and objects. Now I got the interface. So basically in the interface I will say what method I want, right? So I will say I need validate user login. That's what I want, right? So I want the controller to help me in validating the user login from the front end, right? So this is the view project, but I'm now in the controller project, right? So validate the user login. So then what you do is, you in your implementation you have to implement the iUser controller. So this is best practice of coding, and then you will implement this method, right? That's what you do, right? So implement this method, right? You will implement this method which you have declared in your interface, right? So you're going to implement this. Okay guys, cool. Right, my friends, what's next? Okay, so I need to give the implementation, right? Okay, cool, right? I just put void for the moment, but let's see what will be the data type in, once we go forward. So now I got the controller class. Now what should the controller class do? The controller class can connect to the model, right? So in the model I need to have the classes. Now in the model, if you look at our previous discussions, especially lesson 5a, so you will have the logic class and the DAO, data access object classes, right? So the controller need to connect to the data, but then the data has to be manipulated as well, right? So for data manipulation and stuff like that, for that logic in the model you will create the logic class, right? So if you are not clear of this, just look at our previous videos explaining this. So because of that, in the model I will create a class, once again an interface and a class, so to deal with the user logic. So the interface will be iUser logic, right? LOGIC, iUser logic, right? That will be my interface, which will be having the methods or the logic methods to support the logic, right? So I will add it as the interface, and then the class related to that, right? So the class will be the user logic IMPL class. Make sure to delete the I because the naming convention doesn't have I for class. So you add the user logic implementation, my little friends, okay, viewers, right? So I add that user logic implementation. Okay, cool. Once again, very important, don't forget this. I'm going to delete this. I don't want this. You have to make them public, otherwise you will not be able to access them from outside, right? So don't forget this step. And then it's important that user logic implementation will implement the interface user logic. So what do you need as a user logic for this is the same, the same thing you had in the controller. So you want to validate the user login, so it's the same. So what the controller does is it delegates. So it delegates this request. It will delegate this request to the logic class. So the logic class will have the same method, right? And then in the interface, and the class will have the same method, where you will have the logic to public. You will have the logic to perform on validation. So I got the logic class, right? So what the logic class does is, the logic class will connect it to, now to do the login validation, now it needs data, right? It needs to perform on data. So then to perform on data, you don't directly touch the adapters. That is the best practice and the design pattern. So look at our previous video 5a to understand that. So what you have to do now is, you will be creating the DAO classes, right?